on trial. Gung, gung, gung.
Was that a Law and Order noise?
I'll put the Law and Order noise in later.
This time we watch Season 5, Episode 22, Teenage Crime Wave.
This is the one with the teenagers who do crimes.
Yes, but first, as always, we have some follow-up to attend to.
Yes, we do. First off, devoted listener Jeff writes in. Now, you might remember that in our last episode, Adam had a question about Castlevania Rondo of Blood, namely, why is it called that? Is it named after Rondo Hatton, etc.? And Jeff writes in to say, a handful of Castlevania games are named using the template Music Thing of Spooky Thing, most well known as Symphony of the Night, but there's also Aria of Sorrow, Harmony of Dissonance, and possibly some others that I'm not remembering. Rondo of Blood is the first game to follow this naming convention. Sadly, neither the game nor the musical form are named for Rondo Hatton.
Okay. Now, see, this raises yet another question. What the hell is a rondo?
A rondo is just a musical form. It's just sort of like a sonata form or something. It's just a form.
Okay.
All sorts of classical pieces have movements that are rondos and so forth. Furelise is technically a rondo, but you never listen to it that long.
And of course, there's that famous song, I Get a Rondo.
Yes, and Rondo Round Sue. The other thing, though, is, of course, that the Castlevania game started out featuring a bunch of Universal monsters.
Yes, there were all sorts of funny, goofy references at the end of the first Castlevania to popular horror actors. Like there was at the end, Frankenstein, I think, is credited as being played by Boris Karloff, and Dracula is Christopher B.
Yeah. So the idea of naming something Rondo and having Rondo Hatton in the back of your mind, it seems possible. But I couldn't find any evidence for it, and it's different in Japanese anyways, so who knows? I doubt it. I think it is just the musical form. Oh, well. But speaking of Rondo Hatton, we got another fabulous letter, which I'm super excited to share with everybody, from JT Acosta. Adam, do you want to read that out?
Absolutely. JT Acosta writes, hey y'all, just wanted to start off saying that I am a huge fan of the show. I never miss an episode. But the reason I am contacting you is due to the recent episode, The Brute Man, and a funny story I have about the incredible Rondo Hatton. I'm from Riverside, California. We're known as the town that's an hour away from everything. This also includes Los Angeles. There's a barbershop in my area where all the barbers are retired senior citizens. Hands down, the best haircuts I've ever gotten. Well, one day, many years ago, I walked in wearing one of my many horror movie shirts. The barber who cut my hair said, that's an interesting shirt. I responded, yeah, I'm a huge horror fan. My barber responded, do you like classic horror movies? I responded with a resounding, oh, of course. That's how I got into horror as a kid. What followed was a story I never would have expected from someone in my hometown. Barber, have you ever heard of the Creeper? Me. Rondo Hatton? Barber. Hell, I don't know his real name. I just knew him as the Creeper. Me. Pulls out phone, quickly Googles Rondo, and shows the barber. This guy? Barber. Yeah, that guy. Well, I'm originally from L.A., and when I was a kid, way back in the 40s, my friends and I were at a diner. And being dumbass kids, we were making a ruckus at the diner, just being annoying kids. All of a sudden, I felt a hand on my shoulder and heard a deep voice say, can you boys please keep it down? I turn around, and the barber points at Acosta's phone, and that was him telling us to quiet down. My friends and I said, the Creeper, and we ran out of that diner so fast. I was stunned. I get excited when I see another person wearing a horror shirt in my hometown, but someone who had an encounter with a legend never thought I'd see the day. Thanks for reading my email, and keep up the great work, JT Acosta.
What a great story.
Rondo in pure form.
I wonder if that's what inspired the guy to become a barber. I don't know how it would, but just got to thinking about Rondo's head and thought, I bet I could do something with that. I could work with that. I gotta learn the skills to do that.
Yeah, if you gave him a nice Beatles mop top, it would really soften his face.
Let me think about that. I'm going to have to mock that up in Photoshop later to see if you're right. What else? Well, in addition to the fabulous Rondo leftovers from last week, we also have to say this is Donald Pleasence Day.
Yay, we did it. It is once again October 5th, the spookiest day in October, as Donald Pleasence was unleashed to be the greatest. And sure enough, he was. And it's very coincidental because today he would have been 102, and this just so happens to be our 102nd episode.
Now, you say it's coincidental as if I haven't been planning this the whole time.
Yeah, it's some real 7th Doctor Sylvester McCoy stuff.
I was like, we're going to do Manos for episode 100, and we're going to do our special Donald Pleasence Day episode to land for episode 102 on his 102nd birthday.
All right, so that bad news, episode 103 is not coming out for a year.
No. We only do this once. We've been doing all sorts of things to celebrate Donald Pleasence Day on our weekly Fun Times Twitch stream. The Megaphonic hosts, or at least some of them, get together, and we did a special Donald Pleasence game the other day, which I'll probably make available on YouTube if anybody wants to catch it. I know you were in the audience for that one. I hope you were having fun, Adam.
I did. I joined live via satellite, and I enjoyed myself.
So that was pretty good. Is there anything else you're going to be doing to celebrate Donald Pleasence Day?
I'm going to watch as much Donald Pleasence content as I can. I will definitely, though it is not the season, I will watch the Twilight Zone Christmas episode, no, the other one, in which Donald Pleasence plays a teacher retiring over the Christmas period. And I will weep my eyes out because it's one of the most heart-wrenching performances he ever gave for a beautiful script by Rod Serling, one of the best Twilight Zones of all time. And I also plan to rewatch, because I haven't seen it in many years, the TV movie of 1984, written by Nigel Neal and starring Pleasence and Peter Cushing.
Is that the one that has the Eurythmics soundtrack?
No, it's not. This one's from 1954.
Oh, no, that's a little earlier.
A little before their time.
Though their soundtrack is quite good if anybody hasn't heard it.
Oh, yeah. That's the part I remember most. That one has either John Hurt or William Hurt. I always get those two confused. I'm pretty sure it's John.
I think so, too.
Yeah, the alien guy. And, that one's all right, but it's no.
No, I'm sure it's lacking Pleasence.
Yeah.
Well, we will perhaps talk more about Donald Pleasence in a bit, but first we've got to talk about this teenage crime wave that's been springing up.
Sweeping the nation, a story that was ripped from the headlines.
Or wants to tell us it was anyway. This time we watch Season 5, Episode 22, Teenage Crime Wave. Terry is drinking alone at a bar when an older, doughy guy starts hitting on her. She invites him home, but it's a trap. Instead, her friends jump him, and they mug him for everything he's got. Weirdly, among her friends is Jane, out on a blind date with one of the muggers, with no idea that that's what this was all about. Now, why you'd bring a rando along to your crime spree, I don't know, but there she is. Turns out, Terry is a bad girl, and Jane is a good girl. But now, she's an accessory. And as the cops drag them in, Jane's parents show up and tell her she's trash. Anyway, Terry and Jane are off to jail, but as they are being driven to the pokey, Terry's mugging boyfriend Mike pulls the car that they're in over, shoots the police officer, and ties up the matron. Well, where to go now? They drive off until they reach a secluded farm. There, Mike, Terry, and Jane spend what feels like 19 years, but is actually just a few days around Thanksgiving. Their unwilling hosts are an elderly Bible-reading couple whose son is coming home from college for the holiday. And so we wait, getting all tense, waving guns around, waiting, until Mike's friend shows up with some money and a new car for them to make their getaway. And eventually the friend does show up, but by then, the police have been clued off to the teen's location. There's a chase that ends at what I assume is the Griffith Observatory, where Terry is shot, Mike is captured, and I guess Jane is redeemed. The end.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, in the prologue, we get some fun costumes from Mike and the Bots as they plot their escape from the clutches of the evil Dr. Forrester. Tom's in camo, Gypsy is sporting a Kiki outfit, Crow pays homage to the greatest actor in the world, though Trace still can't get the voice right, and Mike sports a beige jumpsuit for the first, and I believe only time in the series. It's time for the customary invention exchange after the break. The Mads present Mace Moose, so you can spray back at those obnoxious perfume cologne samplers in the mall. I mean, they're just doing their job, but Dr. F and TV's Frank are evil, so it makes sense. Poor Frank is quickly bandaged up after his experience with the moose, resembling a doughy dark man. For his part of the exchange, Mike presents his escape doohickey with a fancy helmet. Since it's Mike we're talking about, the device shorts out, which puts the kibosh on his exit strategy. For segment 2, Mike and the Bots perform a semi-musical tribute to doughy guys in honor of the first victim of the teenage crime wave. The ultimate doughy guy? J. Edgar Hoover. Cambot presents a list of notable doughy guys, including Bill Clinton, Dan Aykroyd, and Penn Jillette. Was Aykroyd really a doughy guy in the mid-90s? I mean, he looks frumpy in the Ghostbusters films, but nobody looks good in a jumpsuit unless their name is Joel Hodgson. Mike transforms the Satellite of Love into the first deli in space for segment 3. It's Saul's Deli. The boys were inspired by the surplus of lox that hampered their earlier escape attempt. Dishes at Saul's Deli include the Miles O'Beef, split Pia Zadora soup, the Vince Van Patty Melt, and the Manos Ham of Fate Reuben. Their first customer is, unsurprisingly, TV's Frank. Our fourth segment is a commercial before the commercial break. It's a parody of the Mentos ads that seem to air at least 400 times a day on every TV network in the mid-90s. The lyrics for Mentos, or in this case, Mistos, are a delight. Fun fact, I enraged my mother by making this song the Windows shutdown sound on our computer back in 96. Yes, it would play the entire song before shutting down, and I refused to go into the settings and change it. As is tradition for the final segment, it's letters time. An inmate of the New Hampshire State Prison writes in to voice their confidence behind Mike after watching The Brain That Wouldn't Die. Then Valerie writes in to remind Mike that the bots can't boss him around because he's bigger than them. Save Gypsy, of course, who shows up to prove who's the real boss of the ship. Back in the bowels of Deep 13, Frank has declared himself to be a superhero named Doughy Man and starts giving his manifesto only to get maced again by Dr. F. Oh, and they really like the mace gag because they do it about 12 more times during the end credits. It's glorious. The end.
It is glorious. I was surprised at how successful that repeated mace gag at the end was.
It's scientifically perfect because it's funny. I mean, you know it's coming, but it's funny, and part of why it's funny is that you know it's coming, and then it gets annoying, and then it gets funny again.
And they keep up the nice little subtle variations on how it plays out. It's not quite the conceptual purity of the rake gag from The Simpsons.
No.
But it's still just very excellent. Also, you point out in your summary there that the people who are spritzing perfume willy-nilly in the department stores are just doing their job. And you're right, that's true, but their job is evil.
Yeah, the job is it's not a good job, especially...
They're just following orders is not a...
At least the perfumes ran on time.
Anyway, I don't know about you. I am very scent sensitive, so I can't walk through the cosmetics section in a department store because it's just overwhelmingly perfumey, and I have to hold my breath the whole time, and it's terrible, and I hate it.
Yeah, I don't know. Perfume and cologne is so old-fashioned.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I just associate with like old ladies and old gentlemen. You know, it's like some people's grandparents wore cologne or perfume. Sometimes your mother's friends wore it, but you know, I never. You know, I've never been on a romantic evening with a lady and be like, ooh, what is that scent? Because if I ever thought that, I would say, gee, your hair smells terrific, thinking that she used the shampoo of the same name.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is that you're not supposed to be overwhelmed by it if it's done correctly.
But you always are.
But yeah, I always am. I don't know. I have some friends who are like really nerds in it the way that like a wine or coffee nerd might be and get deep into it. And I can respect that while still not wanting to smell it. Anywho, what did you think about this episode?
I was pleasantly surprised because I had no memory of this episode. I've seen it, but I I didn't remember it, and it's kind of like, I'm glad I didn't see the movie unmisted, because I think that would be a chore. But there are charming things in the movie, and I guess we'll talk about that later. But there's some real great jokes that I appreciate. Like, all the sketches are pretty fun, but there's some really good jokes. Like, I love when the old matron of the house says, "Know much about farm cooking?" And Crow says, "Well, it's bland and there's lots of it." Or that moment where there's a rack focus and they just applaud the fact that there's a rack focus.
Yeah.
And two other jokes come to mind. One, when there's so many butts on the floor, I think it's Mike who asks, like, "Did you have Rod Serling over for dinner?" And Tom says something that I'd never heard before, as in before this episode aired. So it might be kind of like the first version of this joke, to my knowledge. Is Tom asks, there's some innuendo, and Tom asks, "Is that a double Nintendo?" And it's like, I don't think I would have heard that joke before that. So that may be an original to MST3K. I don't know.
I don't know either. We should look that up.
Ah.
Or listener, you can write in info at It's Just a Show. You know the drill.
Cliff Nesteros, tell us the origin of that joke.
Good God, Cliff, if you're listening, hi. Great work.
Great work, man.
I laughed several times watching this. I enjoyed the sketches well enough. I don't know if I'm going to remember the plot after a few weeks.
No.
Even though it's kind of interesting. We'll talk about that in a bit, I suppose. But yeah, let's see, what else? Oh, I guess one of the things I really enjoyed about this episode is, and it's a small thing, but in the opening invention exchange, when Frank gets the face full of mace or silly string, he screams. And often when Frank screams for these kinds of bits, he does this weird, like, like holding it back scream, like head voice scream. But he actually screams quite a lot in this one. And it's not like he's actually in pain. Like, you can tell it's faked and for jokes and so forth. But he does it with full voice, and it sort of blows out the mic a little bit. Like, it definitely causes Dr. Forrester's lines to be a little bit obscured. And it's great. It's all I've ever wanted for Frank to do, is to actually scream when he screams.
Yeah, I remember there being a fair few bloopers of this on the poopy tape. Because Trace would keep cracking up.
It's very funny.
Yeah. No, it's the Mace Moose stuff is a great bit of business here in this episode. Yeah, like I wouldn't consider, like, this isn't, one of the all-time greats, MST3K, but if you haven't seen this one in a while, or perhaps you have a less than savory memory of it, like, give it a shot. Give it another shot. It's really well done. It's a really solid episode.
And I hope at some point when they're doing some sort of fundraiser or whatever, that the Mads offer a tier in which you can spray as much silly string as you can at Frank and have him scream at you. So I want to inhabit that role. That would be fun.
It's always nice to make your idol scream.
But I think it's time we put this movie and the teenagers within it on trial.
Ooh.
So we've watched some other teenagers be in bad movies before. It's interesting to think about how the teenagers get portrayed in this one, and if this movie is somehow more or less sufferable than, say, Kitten with a Whip.
Yeah, that was the first one that came to mind, because while I was watching this, it's funny. I could sit down and watch this episode and just enjoy it as an episode. It's a bad movie being elevated by the MST3K treatment, and a lot of fun. And watching Kitten with a Whip, it's so tense in a not particularly engaging way. You're just kind of stuck with these characters. It's like an episode of Frasier. Everyone is behaving stupidly because they can't tell the truth or do the most logical thing. And so they just keep going along with the absurdity of the situation that they're in. And for a long time, you are stuck in a house, which you are in this film. And yet, Kitten with a Whip decides to shake things up and take us to Mexico. And it still feels like you're trapped because you're with these, like, insufferable characters. And I didn't find that here.
That's a really interesting point I hadn't thought about, that the characters in Kitten with a Whip are just making bad choices because they don't tell the truth habitually. It's one of those like it's not an earned plot in that sense, right? It happens because they're all pathologically incapable of telling the truth, and yet the movie isn't really about their incapability of telling the truth. It's about the terrible situations they get themselves into, and it's like, well, I mean, I guess it could happen, but you really had to do the worst possible thing a lot. This one, everybody's actions, whether they're good or bad, everybody's actions kind of make sense.
Yeah, these characters are more well realized than Kitten with a Whip, which is damning with faint praise.
They are one-dimensional, but that dimension doesn't point directly towards plot convenience.
No. And I think adding to the charm is that, with Kitten with a Whip, you had that one guy who is like insufferably like beatniky,
Yeah.
Awful. And that's kind of in the language of the other characters too, to a lesser extent. So you don't even need that guy because they're already kind of talking like that anyway. But here it's really charming because you've got such great stereotypes. Like the movie's old timiness is a huge factor working for it. You've got the God-fearing old couple. You've got people who are good, who are very, very good, and the people who are bad are just misguided, but still deserve to be punished. And I just like any movie where the characters refer to money as loot.
Okay. That explains why you haven't liked any movie since 1991.
No. Not since the Wet Bandits decided to rob Kevin McAllister's house.
Oh, boy. Also, for all the sort of over-the-top, quote-unquote, sex appeal of What's-Her-Toes in Kitten with a Whip,
mm-hmm.
I've already forgotten who, Anne Margaret?
Anne Margaret, you're right.
Of Anne Margaret.
I was about to say Anne Magrock.
Of Anne Magrock in Kitten with a Whip. Molly McCart and her little cropped haircut, much more interesting and attractive.
Yes, I was about to say, Margaret, I was going to say Margaret Atwood.
Margaret Atwood really didn't pull that haircut off when she tried it.
No. But nonetheless, her theremin concert was great. No, Anne Margaret, this famous sex symbol, and yet this unknown actress really is doing, I think, a much better job, but is also far more fetching.
Yeah, I heard that when the movie came out, they tried to make her haircut a thing, and that didn't happen because it's a bad movie and nobody saw it. But, they were on the right track. It's a great haircut.
Absolutely. This totally could have been the Rachel of its time.
Well, I had watched this and thought about Girls Town, which we covered a very long time ago.
Yeah.
Because it's about girls who go bad and who need to go through some sort of redemption arc.
And there's a town.
And there's also there is sort of a town. I mean, they leave the town and then they end up in the rural areas far from everything. But yeah, there's also sort of that scene early on when they are supposed to be going to the industrial school, which is some sort of young female offenders prison name I've never heard before, but fair enough. But you've got like the matron who's got a lot of that like big nun energy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And yet, of course, the movie quickly diverges from that and goes elsewhere into this weird, we're stuck in this house for ages to the point where it's almost like, wait, was this originally a play?
And they jazzed it up with a women in prison sequence?
Yeah, exactly. They just filled out some of the older stuff that was left tacit or it was explained through dialogue in the original play version of it, and then added the Griffiths Observatory because after Rebel Without a Cause, you had to.
Yeah, say what you will about Teenage Crime Wave, but it sure is Pinteresque.
And then it made me think of another episode that we had watched recently, which is Manos.
Yeah.
Because in the same way, like, that's about people who unexpectedly come to a house in the middle of nowhere and have their lives changed by it. And yet Manos, even though all the action takes place inside the house, I guess the house and like the chapel out back, but still, there's the barn sequence in this movie. My point is, this is a far more claustrophobic movie than even Manos.
Oh.
Which could have done with more claustrophobia, actually.
I don't know. I find that there's such a professional sheen to this movie. Not that it's like any great shakes in terms of production quality, but it's certainly like reasonably made for the time, and seems shot as professionally as any B movie would be shot. And so I didn't get that. Whereas like when I think back to Manos always reminds me of what my friends would describe as a bad drug trip,
Right.
where it's just sweaty and uncomfortable, and you can't get out of this thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I want more of that. I guess part of what I'm thinking is that for all that Manos feels like as a film, you have no idea how long it's going on for. The plot events happen one after the other.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Teenage Crime Wave, especially when they're in the house, there's so many cuts from one scene to another where time has passed. There's a lot of those, and yet it's all happening over like 2 days.
Yeah.
But because there's so many jumps, and now it's later, and now it's later, and there's no like specificity as to how much later it is. It's just amorphously later, that it's like, oh my God, they've been in this house for years. Like, what is going on? That made it feel especially draggy.
It really could have used that SpongeBob SquarePants title card of like 12 seconds later.
I mean, everything should have that.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 tawdry tidbits about today's episode, Teenage Crime Wave. Go, Adam, go!
Hey, did you know today's movie was also released under the title Jailbait? Perhaps they were hoping to cash in on the popularity of Ed Wood's Jailbait, released the previous year. For more information on Jailbait, check out It's Just a Show episode 50, where we covered The Violent Years.
Harry Essex, co-screenwriter of today's film, co-wrote the beloved 50s genre films Creature from the Black Lagoon and It Came from Outer Space. Naturally, we covered the Black Lagoon sequel, Revenge of the Creature, when Mike and the Bots riffed it in Season 8 for our 22nd episode, but perhaps Essex's absence from the writing room is why Gilman's Revenge turned out to be such a dud.
And Ray Buffum, who co-wrote the screenplay with Essex and provided the original story treatment, wrote The Brain from Planet Arus, which has been crying out for the MST3K treatment and was recently riffed by the Mads for their YouTube shows. It stars John Agar, whom you may remember from the aforementioned Revenge of the Creature.
Our lead actor, Tommy Cook, has, let's say, a suspiciously complimentary and detailed IMDb bio page. According to this source, which certainly wasn't written by Tommy Cook himself, he was, quote, born on exactly the same date as fellow actor John Wood of War Games and Ladyhawke fame. Fun!
His bio also says that he wrote the script for a TV show that would later be turned into the hit series The Mod Squad. And yes, he was developing a show with Desilu Studios called Young Man with a Badge, which was awfully similar to The Mod Squad. But there's no evidence that one influenced the other.
The bio also reports that Cook was, quote, known for pulling pranks on film sets. While shooting American Gorilla in the Philippines from 1950, starring Tyrone Power, he played a big prank on co-star Micheline Prel. Oh, this is going to be great.
So here's the prank. He calls her up in her hotel room and, quote, disguised his voice as a foreign hotel manager. I'm pretty sure that means he did a racist accent, but all right. And told her they were moving her to another hotel. Miss Prell packed up her belongings and waited for hours at the hotel lobby, waiting for a driver to take her to her new lodgings.
Oh, all right. And then... wait, that's the whole prank. He wasted a few hours of her time. Well, that must have been fun to watch. Did he even see her? Was this just about wasting her time? What a jerk.
His bio also says, quote, he portrayed Little Beaver in the Republic film serial Adventures of Red Ryder from 1940, and then went on to recreate his role in Mutual Radio's The Adventures of Red Ryder from 1942 to 1945. This led to his early typecasting in olive-skinned ethnic film roles as Africans, Indians, Italians, Hispanics, Arabians, etc. Oh no.
Oh, Tommy Cook, for your sake, I hope you didn't write these yourself. What else? Apparently, he was, quote, one of the leading junior tennis players in Southern California at one time, and often created/emceed/played tournaments for charity. And it says that he instigated the Bobby Riggs Billie Jean King Challenge before it was televised.
There's an interview with Tommy Cook about this in an upcoming issue of Retro Fan magazine. Cook was a young tennis prodigy, and Bobby Riggs was his hero, and he managed to get to know him. One day, he says, he got the idea of a battle between a man and a woman, and got Riggs and King on board, but his 90-day option ran out before he could get any network interest.
But Bobby Riggs was still into the idea and carried on with it without Tommy Cook's involvement. Huh. Well, maybe, although it appears that a 2005 book about the match doesn't mention Tommy Cook at all, and the only citations for his involvement that I can find come from Tommy himself. But hey, maybe.
Anyway, Tommy Cook will be playing the boss in the upcoming film Enforcer, The Asset, which is currently filming, so look forward to that.
And that's time. I'm glad we finally are taking Tommy Cook to task.
He's had it too good for too long.
He seems like he's now a pleasant enough guy, but
These pranks.
Also, the pranks were terrible.
Yeah, these are not even good pranks. I mean, it's a charming prank? Leslie Nielsen and his fart machine. That's what we want.
Yeah, that's a great prank. This is the sort of prank that only a bad kid would do.
Oh, no.
Somebody who might get involved in a teenage crime wave.
Well, Chris, that begs the question. I've known you as a man, but I've never known you as a boy. Were you ever a bad kid?
I was the worst.
Ooh.
No, all right, what is a bad kid? Give me a definition, I'll tell you if I fit it.
Well, a bad kid does wrong, often does what Goofus would do instead of gallant, and, gets into mischief, plays pranks, hurts feelings and breaks hearts, and makes his or her poor parents worry about what they will become. Those are some of the signs of bad kids.
Yeah, I don't think I was much of a bad kid, although, I did a little bad here and there.
Mm-hmm.
I shoplifted at a candy bar once.
Ooh, bad.
I cut class rather a lot.
Uh-huh.
And I certainly didn't always do what I was told when my parents tried to punish me for, getting poor grades because I was cutting class so much.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had the get out of jail free card of saying I'm going to the library, which was a totally believable thing for a 12-year-old me to do, and then just going over to a friend's house.
So lying, stealing, cutting class. I mean, Chris, you were the original Bart Simpson.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I didn't really do much graffitiing. Just a little tiny bit, I guess,
Uh-huh.
on the desk.
But your skateboarding was non pareil.
Yeah, if by skateboarding you mean walking. What about you? Were you a bad little kid?
Well, when I was a kid, I was always told to stay away from the older kids in school who in those days would hang around outside the doors every morning and smoke. I don't know how common this is now, but as a child of born in 1983, you would just go to school and the older kids would just be smoking within 5 feet of the doors, often with the teachers.
Right.
That was just normal. I don't know if that happens now. And there were dozens of them, and that would get pointed out by my mother and father, like those were the bad kids. But meanwhile, I'm a little kid. I'm cursing. I make crank phone calls.
Wow. I never did that. You must have been worse than me.
I may have been. I shoplifted pornography a couple of times.
I watched pornography on the channels where you had to do the funny thing to get it in squiggly vision.
Yeah.
And that's kind of stealing.
Yeah, that's true. And I of the many things I've done, when I was in grade 9 or so, I objected to taking a religious studies class, which was mandatory, because I was an atheist, and the teacher, who was about 5'1", said, "Too bad, that's the curriculum," or whatever. And I stood up in front of the entire class and said, "You can't boss me around, I'm bigger than you," resulting in one of many detentions. And I got kicked out of Beavers. That's like the thing before Scouts. Yeah. I don't know if that's a Canadian thing or not. Probably, given the name Beavers. But because I got fed up with taking orders from the Scoutmaster or Beaver Chief or whatever, and I just kicked him right in the balls. And I was like 8.
Why didn't they cast you instead of Macaulay Culkin?
I don't know. Maybe because I had Brando levels of unpredictability.
Did you ever get caught and put through the system as what happens to the kids in these movies?
I got a lot of detention.
Okay.
sometimes parents would say, "You can't hang around my son or daughter anymore."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And what's weird is that at no point did I realize I was a bad kid. I just sort of thought, it's like, oh, the smokers are like bad. Bullies are bad kids. I never bullied anybody. And then I realized it's like, oh no, I am a bad kid. But more important, it's like, I'm behaving crazy. Like, it's not just bad, it's like fairly insane. The closest thing that we would get to that is that we would always watch those after school type specials videos where you would see the consequences of mouthing off, as I often did, and it never worked because I always thought, that's a cool kid who is taken down by the cruelties of life and a system that rails against individuality. I was always on the side of the bad kid. And whenever the kid learned his lesson and became a good kid, I just thought, I was like, I'd love to push that kid.
Well, so when you watch these movies now, do you have the same kind of feeling? Are you like against Jane and in favor of Terry?
Well, that's the thing about movies like this, is that where, as I said, it's like the charm of this is the corniness of it. The good are impossibly good, and the bad are just so twisted up inside. And, it brings out the best in these performers because the bad people are super fun and charming to watch, I found. Mm-hmm. And so I was kind of rooting for them. And sure enough, like, I think I've always liked, because the thing I do, and I still do to this day, because essentially I realize that I am an overgrown child. I am king of the boys, and I like kind of pushing buttons with people, but never to the point where I'd actually like hurt somebody's feelings. And I still do this, and it's clearly been a lifelong thing because I have a distinct memory came up while I was doing some thinking about this for the podcast. Is that there was a moment my grandfather. He got himself a nice tall glass full of ice, and he poured himself his favorite drink, a rum and coke. And he just filled it to the brim. It's like, and he told me, it's like, first one of the day. I was only about 6 years old. And he said, first one of the day. What a great way to start the day, Adam. And one of his cats named Taffy came up on the table, looked straight at him, and immediately headbutted the drink off the table, breaking the glass. And not only did I laugh and point at my grandfather laughing, I also pointed to Taffy and said, "That's me." So I've always kind of admired and respected troublemakers.
Well, you never got taken in for any of your crimes and misdemeanors, and neither did I. So we never had to escape from a prison. We never had to wrest ourselves away from being transferred to one place or another, and we never had to forge any Nazi documents like Crow does at the very beginning of this episode.
Bad news, Mike. I've gone blind from forging 1,000 Nazi documents.
No, you haven't.
Because at the start, of course, it's all a giant parody of a little film called The Great Escape.
Yes. Have you seen The Great Escape yet?
I have seen it before, and I rewatched it again yesterday for this episode.
Oh, it's a lovely film. I really love it.
It's very long.
It's pretty long, yeah. But that's because you got so many actors in it. You got to give them all time.
Yes, so many actors, not a one of them female.
No.
I've seen gay porn with more females in it.
Yeah, sure. But I bet you any money that they didn't have faces like these. This is a great face movie.
It is a pretty good face movie, absolutely.
You got Donald Pleasence and James Coburn and Steve McQueen and a young Charles Bronson, and they all got faces like granite or mashed potatoes, and it's wonderful.
I didn't even recognize Charles Bronson until I finally looked up who the heck that was.
No, because he's like handsome back in the day.
Maybe.
He's like borderline handsome, don't you think?
He's certainly buff, and he gets a shower scene, so that's, I guess, something. But he's also putting on a weird accent.
Yeah, he is.
Which turns out supposed to be Polish. Would never have guessed that.
And yet it's probably the best performance he ever gave.
Probably. Yeah, he's not bad at it. If anybody doesn't know, The Great Escape from 1963 is all about a bunch of World War II people who are caught and put into a camp inside, well, technically inside Poland, but part of Poland that was controlled by Germany at this point, into a camp where they would not be able to escape again, for these people keep escaping and escaping and escaping. And so they plan to do the biggest escape imaginable and attempt to free 250 people from the camp. They get not quite that many out, 70-something, and then most of them are recaptured or killed before the end of the movie.
Yeah. Now, I love the movie because, like, I love the way that it balances tones. Like, it can be very funny. Like, at times, you just feel like you're watching a buddy movie, and then you realize, it's like, oh, all these men are in danger.
Yes.
It gets so cozy at times. And there's real threat, there's action and adventure, and it gets very sad in places. Like, it really gives you, it's a buffet for the senses. And I've always appreciated it. So it's real fun. But I really appreciate it because of all these actors, it can be kind of tricky when you see a movie with a great cast, like a truly huge cast, because you worry it's like, oh, well, I love all these actors, but will they get enough to do? And Donald Pleasence gets the best part of the movie. Like, the blind forger arc is my favorite part. Like, even if I was just reading it as a script, I mean, he certainly makes that come to life, and he makes that very poignant. But I think Colin the Forger is the most interesting character.
Yep, he's the one in charge of, again, forging all the documents. He's been doing this for a long time, and he realizes right before the big escape day that he can no longer see. It happens really suddenly for something that is built to be a kind of ongoing deterioration. And it doesn't kind of make any sense on the surface, but whatever. It's fine. Once you accept it, it's all good. And certainly Donald Pleasence does a terrific job at going through those phases. He's also really great before the blindness kicks in. Who doesn't want to see a lecture on birds from Donald Pleasence?
and he does a great bit of acting because he is a blind man pretending not to be blind.
Yeah, he's a sighted man pretending to be a blind man pretending to be a sighted man.
Yeah, it's great. I think that stuff's the most riveting stuff in the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I certainly don't need to see more of Steve McQueen.
No. Although perhaps you'll be tempted to watch Great Escape 2, where Donald Pleasence is back, but he's not playing the same character. He's playing one of the Nazis this time.
Oh.
Christopher Reeve is in it.
I don't want to see this at all. Why? What? I've never heard of this. Why did they do this?
Yeah, they just, for whatever reason, they decided to remake The Great Escape, which is, fine. Like, people remake stuff all the time. There have been several remakes of Casablanca, one of which may have Charles Bronson in it. I don't know. Is he in Cabo Blanco, listeners? Write in and tell us. Of course, the best Casablanca is Barbed Wire. But
he is in Cabo Blanco.
I knew it. Of all the gin joints in all the world, you had to walk into mine. That would be amazing. Oh God. Anywho, Great Escape 2 is not particularly good. Like, the best you can say about it is that it's competent. Christopher Reeve is fine, but he's not giving one of his better performances. Donald Pleasence is a lot of fun playing a bad guy. He hated the Nazis because he actually encountered them, and he absolutely loves to make them seem ridiculous. And he certainly while still keeping the real edge and the real threat to them. So he makes a great big bad guy.
Now I have to ask you, have you played The Great Escape: the video game?
Is this like a Commodore 64 thing?
It is from 2003.
Oh.
For Xbox, Windows, and PlayStation 2.
I would not have guessed.
It's based on the movie, and there are 4 playable characters. You can play McDonald, who you don't remember, Jordan Jackson's character. You can play James Coburn's character. You can play Steve McQueen's character, or you can play James Garner's character, Hendley, which means that you have an escort quest.
What?
And you must escort Blythe. I don't know whether Blythe is played by Donald Pleasence or looks like Donald Pleasence in the game. I haven't been able to find clips of it, though. I also haven't had a chance to look for them yet. But and I know that they had some sound bites of Steve McQueen from the film. I don't think there's any of Donald Pleasence. Still, might be worth checking out, or at least trying to track down a Let's Play of it.
Yeah, that's fun. That's definitely fun.
It was rated T for teens.
Oh, wow.
which I think the movie basically was too. But anyway.
Possibly because there's like a shower quest with Charles Bronson. Does that
Hello.
full butt in it?
Anyway, good job, Donald Pleasence. Happy birthday. That's another thing that you can watch if you've got 3 hours.
Yeah. And hey, if you're interested in his real life war stories, we did talk about that in a previous episode. I think it was Puma Man, where I told the story. Basically retold it from Donald Pleasence's telling of it, where basically involves Nazis, a downed plane, and a whole lot of condoms.
Link in the show
Check
notes.
that out. Link in the show notes.
It doesn't matter what comes. Fresh goes better in life with Mentos Fresh and Full of Life. Nothing gets to you staying fresh, staying cool with Mentos Fresh and Full of Life. Fresh goes better. Mentos freshness. Fresh goes better with Mentos Fresh and Full of Life. Mentos, the fresh maker.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, that was everywhere for a while. Especially on Comedy Central / whatever it was at that point.
Yeah, I had read, because I mean, I just knew it because it was from everywhere. I didn't get Comedy Central. So I didn't know that this was apparently like an irritant to Best Brains, or they certainly noticed and had some thoughts about all those Mentos ads, because there's a little bit of acid to this sketch.
Yeah, there was a lot of Mentos ads on the channel. I mean, they had, it often felt like they had about 7 ads. They had that one. They had the Playboy ad where it was good to be the Santa. They had the Jolly Ranchers ad about the size of the Jolly Rancher.
Oh, yeah.
A few other ones. But yes, the Mentos one was omnipresent. Here's the thing about Mentos.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, this isn't the thing, but it's a thing about Mentos. First off, do you know when Mentos first hit the market?
I'm going to say 1973.
1932.
What?
Yep.
Are they originally an American product?
Nope.
That's what I thought.
They, they're a Dutch product.
Aha, yeah.
Or Italian Dutch or something like that. So here's the thing. They were around for a while. My mother had a job in Manhattan when I was a kid. And I don't remember whether this was a vending machine at her work or a very good bodega right nearby. But she had access to really weird candies.
Oh, so you probably had a Zagnut at some point in your life.
I had all sorts of weird candies. This is like where I first had British candy bars, because you get like Lion bars and so forth. And it was the first time I'd had Mentos, and we got real into Mentos. And then about 2 years later, 3 years later, after we'd kind of gotten tired of Mentos, then the ads started happening. And I was like, oh, good for Mentos. They're putting out ads. That's great. And then they never stopped.
No.
And I think they still roll. I mean, certainly they've got free real estate in my brain.
Yeah, like I don't think you could have escaped the 90s without having those Mentos, that Mentos jingle, but also the ads themselves of someone wandering around and they get interrupted doing a thing. And it's like, oh, I wanted to do the thing. And then they quirkily complete their task and smile and have a Mento. Like they were, I don't know about you, but there was something unmistakably foreign about the Mentos ads. Like they reeked of like, this was shot in Europe. And there was something so off about them that I honestly wasn't sure if Mentos were real or this was some kind of parody, because it really felt almost like an SNL bit. And I was like, is this some kind of like trick and Mentos don't exist and this will turn out to be a promo for a movie or like some kind of Howard Stern radio stunt?
Yeah, obviously I'd already had Mentos, so that never affected me. But you're right, like they did feel very European at a time when, like, they started airing in 1991, and the internet wasn't as robust then. So I didn't necessarily have as much of a sense of what European fashions were and what European television looked like. So I couldn't quite immediately call it as what was off about it, right? I mean, I was also a kid, but it definitely was very weird and very off. And yet an absolute earworm, mindworm coming to devour your brain and replace it with freshness full of life.
Yeah, it just clomped on there, and it stayed with you. And it's much like the Mace Moose joke, in that I don't know if I liked it the first time, probably not. And then but I definitely had a period where I hated the Mentos ads. It's like, God damn it, another one of these. And then after a while, I was like, Fresco's better, and I just would sing along with the ad. So it worked. And that jingle comes to mind sometimes, and if I see Mentos, I think of the ad. So I guess it's a very successful ad.
Well, we've talked a lot about The Great Escape, and I guess about Teenage Crime Wave, and I think we have time for just one more little final factoid. Adam, do you have anything for us this time?
I do. I'm delighted to see the presence of Silly String in this episode for the Mace Moose.
Yes.
Yeah, Silly String by Whammo. And that was all the rage when I was young, and I imagine it was the same for you. Like, there was definitely a Silly String period of your life.
A little bit, yes.
Yeah. I was forbidden from using Silly String after a while because in my childhood home, I sprayed the ceiling with it. And that stuff doesn't come out.
Right.
As it turns out. Like, you can scrape it off, but there will be a greasy stain that remains forever. But so I was curious, but I haven't seen Silly String in a long time. And I thought, it's like, oh, did it just die out? Was it a fad that just, just relegated to obscurity, like Nickelodeon GAC or something? And I looked it up, and I found out some interesting things about Silly String. One, it's been banned in places. Like, it's banned in the city of Ridgewood, New Jersey.
Because it's annoying? Because it's hard to get off of things?
Yeah, it's hard to get off of things, but also mostly it's the aerosol. Like, the aerosol is damaging to the environment.
Oh, I never thought about that. Huh.
Yeah, and which makes perfect sense, but as a child, I never thought of it. And then as an adult, it's like, where's all the Silly String? Places ban it for Halloween. I think mostly because of the hassle rather than the environmental effects.
Sure, yeah.
And most interestingly, I found out, and at first I thought, no, this has to be fake. But it's true. There's a number of sources where it's been used by the military to detect tripwires.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's like, just picturing all those military dudes like using Silly String for this like incredibly dangerous mission is such a surreal sight to imagine.
Oh, that's real good. So I didn't play with Silly String a lot when I was a kid. I mean, I definitely did it a few times, but it's sort of like, you ever play a video game?
I have.
And you know how in video games you might have consumables?
Wait, what's a consumable?
It's like a one-use only kind of thing. Like a potion that increases your strength by a few numbers or whatever, if in those kinds of video games, like RPGs. And for a lot of us, I'm not alone in this, you never use the consumables because you might need it later.
Makes perfect sense.
So Silly String fell into this category. I dare not use it now, because what if I want to use it later? Then it will be gone.
What if you're in a situation so serious that it demands Silly String and you've run out?
You've reached the ideal moment of Silly Stringing somebody, but you did it for a no good, no fun joke a few months ago. Yeah. But I did use squirt cheese a lot.
Oh, there you go.
Which is Silly String, but edible. Kind of.
And that's the thing, as a kid, you see all those delightful neon strings and you immediately think, I wish I could eat that.
Exactly. With the cheese stuff, you sure can.
You know, what's interesting too about Silly String that I found out is that it had a not so silly origin.
It was originally intended as a sort of healing spray for wounded soldiers to cover up their wounds.
Yeah, and that's like, you think of that as
Wait,
like,
it was?
Yes.
Oh, God.
That's actually it.
That was a guess.
It was supposed to be an instant drying cast.
Right.
And that's like, oh, that would have been like a brilliant invention. But instead they made Silly String. Fellas with the delightfully funny names of Leonard A. Fish and Robert P. Cox, a Cox and Fish production.
No, we're not making those jokes. This is not a family-friendly podcast, but it's not going to be that family-friendly.
Run blue.
Wow. Just to let you know, I believe they have in fact invented spray-on casts.
Oh, good.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you've ever eaten silly string and want to tell us what it tastes like, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, and we're on Twitter at itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you. For as little as $1 an episode, you can help us research and record this show, and you can listen to all our superfan bonus bits. You can find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/102.
Wow, I think, we have covered ourselves with all the shame of teenagers who've committed a crime wave, and we've been scared straight, so to speak. What are we going to do next time, Chris, on this show? Something far less delinquent, I hope.
I imagine so. We're going to have to do an episode for the second most scary day in October, Halloween. And I think nothing could be more Halloween-y than Season 9, Episode 8, The Touch of Satan.
Ooh, see, that's great, is that we just get a little touch of Satan, not a whole thing.
Yeah, the look, the feel of Satan, the fabric of our lives. It's going to be great.
Yeah. That'll be fun. I've seen this episode before because this is because we've had a series of faulty memories as of the last few episodes. So
Okay.
I'm almost reluctant to say anything. But if memory serves, this is where the fish lives episode.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's a non sequitur I've not forgotten.
Oh, good. Good. Well, all right. I'm looking forward to this one. It's rated R, so we might get to see some boobies.
Oh my God.
I know. Unheard of. But until then...
Remember, you're dirt.
Oh, wow. It's DeForest Kelley. Take it away, Theme Squad. I was the worst.